Hi guys, I'm Ryan Newsman and welcome to my fly tying channel. If you haven't already done so, consider hitting the subscribe button down below. That'll keep you up to date with everything as I upload it. My channel already contains hundreds of videos covering a wide range of both patterns and techniques, from the basic to the more advanced. So without delay, let's get on with the show. Hi guys, so something a little bit unusual for myself tonight. I've been asked to tie a sailfish fly. So we're going to tie it as a tube here. So I'm using this predator tubing that we would tie our pike flies on, and I'm going to put that back onto the mandrel here. So we have here probably 10 centimeters or so. So what will happen here is that there'll be a piece of junction tubing that'll go on the back to accept the hook. So if you want, at this stage, what you could do is to flare that to take it, or if you were using a smaller hook, I suppose this tubing may do the job on its own. So I'll just push that back over the flange there, and then we're going to leave a centimeter or so to accept some sort of a junction tubing, and add our big fly thread. Next I'm going to add a little bit of super glue to that for security and wind into it. So for the length of this fly, what we're going to have to use is some of these big sort of saddle feathers here. And this is a grizzle dyed pink. So I'll take 3 of the longer feathers there. And I'm going to tie these in around the shank. One, two, three. And bind it down. I'll just trim off the butt ends of that, and then I'm going to put a little bit of super glue on those tie ends again, because this is fairly brutal sort of fishing. So next what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a little bit of like a strawberry pink kind of ice dubbing type stuff, just to tidy up that tie-in point, and also it'll give us a little bit of kick for the next set of feathers. So next what we're going to put on is some pink schlappen. So I'm going to take 4 or 5 of those, and the same job, we're just going to tie these in cloaked around the fly. But what I'm going to do with these is I'm just going to trim off the very butt of them, because they're quite bare at the base of the feather. So we're just going to trim them back till we start to get a little bit of fluff. And the same thing again, we're just going to tie them in by their base and travel around the shank of the tube. A couple of turns to bind each one down. And that's just giving us a little bit more of a baitfish type profile to this fly. So again, we're going to secure those wraps. I'm actually just going to run my super glue on 3 or 4 inches of my tie-in thread and bind down into that. So if you want to bulk it up some more, you could go with more schlappen, or I think what we're going to do here is I'm going to pick another pink badger type cape, smaller feathers this time. Take out 3 or 4 of those and tie them in. So you can continue to tie them in with the curvature inwards, or if you want a little bit more play and kick, turn them so that the curvature curves outwards. Again, bind them down, glue up the thread and tie into that. So there's no great skill to the actual tying of the body of the fly there. You just pick feathers of varying lengths, so longer, intermediate and shorter, and that will give you a sort of a bait fish type profile. So next, to bulk that out a little bit, what we're going to do is we're going to tie in some, like a cerise marabou. Now you could wind this if you want, but what I'm going to do is just take the feather, stroke it along so that all the fibers sort of bunch up towards the tip, and then grab it and trim that off, leaving myself 5 or 6 mil out the end to tie in on. And then we'll just go around the shank. Again, it'll probably take 3 of these, maybe 4, to get you around. Okay, so that is the actual feather part finished of our tie-in. So I'm just going to take the super glue and really soak that tie-in point of the marabou. Then we bind over that, and 1/2 hitch into the glue will be enough to hold that in place. So that now is already a sort of a bait fish profile, but what we're going to do is we're going to add on like a popper style head to this. Now you could use foam, you can use whatever you want. What I'm going to do is use a wine cork for this. So these things are not designed to be cast all day or to be cast long distances. So my understanding of it is that you only fish actually are casting them for a few minutes of each day when there's a fish in the vicinity. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a drill here, and I have a 5mm bit on this, and I'm going to drill a hole through the center of my cork, and that is going to act as our popper head. So the popper is also going to need eyes. So we're going to have to cut like a little recess to accept the eyes, because when you get into big eyes, they're flat, but if you're going around something that's circular like this as a popper, they won't. They'll sort of stick to it by their middles, and then the edges of the eyes will stick out a bit. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to set that on that now until we get the base for the eyes cut. So for these eyes, these are probably 15mm eyes. So I'm going to line them up on the popper head, and I'm going to take a blade and I'm going to just put a cut at the front of the eye. I'm going to hold it down and put another cut just behind the eye. Set that off to the side. So I know now that that will cut to the size of the eye that I'm using. So I'll then take my blade and I'll shave off down towards the rear cut, and then I'm going to reverse that round and I'm going to shave it up towards the front cut that I made, and that will give me like a little level platform in which to seat my eyes. So that's one side done. I'll flip it over and do the same on the other, and I suppose the pattern on this cork is sort of helping me with this respect, in that I have lines to guide me for the first cut. So down behind the back eye, cut across and trim. So that's our cork popper head ready to receive the eyes. So what we'll do now is to fix the back of the cork, and we're also going to glue this to the tube itself. So for that I'm going to use a 2-part epoxy, and when I mix this up I use sort of cocktail sticks or skewers to do it, and I do it on these little post-it pads. So we take our 2-part epoxy, squirt some out onto our little piece of paper there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add some glitter to this. So I'm going to add some silver glitter into the mix, and then I'm going to mix that up on my little post-it pad here, and now you see that I have a blob of silver glitter epoxy. So what I'm going to do is to take my skewer, it has some epoxy on it, and I'm going to ram that down the center of my cork, coat the inside with it. I'm going to slide that on, and then I'm going to just take a little bit of epoxy here and I'm going to paint basically the end that is approaching the fly as such with that. Then I'm going to push that back onto the fly. So this end here, as you can see, has clogged up a little bit with it, but that's why I used a longer tube than what I actually need so that I can trim this off. So what we'll do is just to give that tube a little bit of a clean with a piece of paper or with a piece of toilet roll or kitchen roll or something like that, and then I'm going to take what's left of my epoxy here and I'm going to just do a run around the rear of the head. So if you're worried about your materials getting in your way, what you can do is use a clip. So you can use a hair clip, or this happens to be like a garden clip. I think it's for clipping up vines or something. So I'm just going to do a little run around the base of the popper head here. So it's not overly long, the bit that I'm epoxying here. It might be 8 to 10 mil. So next I'll attach my tie-in thread again. So this is fairly fast setting epoxy, so I want that to sort of set itself off here a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a skirt out of this holographic pink material. Now these flies here, because of the length of them, if you start using our usual sort of fine flashes, they'll tangle in whatever hook setup, and I think the idea with this one is that there'll be a double hook setup in behind it. So if you start using soft, thin materials, they're going to tangle with it. So what I'm using here is a holographic ribbon. So this is actually 5 mil thick, but it's fairly stiff. Now you can buy skirts already made for this, but they're not that readily available on our side of the pond. So I'm making my own. I'm reattaching my thread there, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put like a skirt of these holographic bits of ribbon around it. So these are approximately 8 to 10 centimeters long, and I'm just going to line up 3 at a time with the back of my head and put a wrap across it, and then I'm going to take another 3 and we'll just advance the whole way around the head here. Now I have to do this while my epoxy is still liquid. Because I want it to glue them down. So I'll line up their bases, set them up on top. The tie-in thread over, just align them a little bit and move on around. This is a little bit time consuming, but it'll give me a nice stiff skirt with that sort of nice pink holographic flash to it, and as I said, it'll reduce the chances of tangling. So last bunch goes in, tie across that, and a couple of turns. So if we want, we can super glue that now, or if your epoxy is still a little bit liquid, you could just put a slight little run over our tie-in thread here, and the epoxy is just starting to stiffen itself up a little bit. So what we can now start to do then is to fold these back, and so I'm taking few over at a time, and as I double them, I'm just tying across with the tie-in thread just to hold them back in place. So, and then just going to do one big half hitch with my tie-in thread and cut that off. So that's the end of the tying part of it. So the rest of this is just using epoxy, etc., to create a head. So as you can see, we have a nice stiff holographic pink skirt. So next what we're going to do is to coat the popper head. I'm going to trim this spare bit of tubing off, flare it, and then I'm going to create the head epoxy. So again, on this one I'm going to incorporate some glitters. So if we take our epoxy, and we now need a bigger, slightly bigger volume to cover the hook, or the head, sorry. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix in some different glitters. So here I've got a pearl glitter, so I'll mix that into it. I'm going to mix in a little bit of a purple. That's quite a fine glitter. A deep pink. A light pink. And a bit more of the silver. And if you want, you can add all manner of different glitters. Just make up your own mix. I have a few sort of larger ones as well in there. And what I'm going to do now, when I have this mixture of glitter on my blob of epoxy, I'm just going to mix the whole thing in. And what this actually also, I find, gives you a good indication of how well you've mixed your epoxy if you get like a homogeneous, even mix of glitters through it. So as you can see, we now have this blob as such. So I now scrape it up off the page. And what I want to do is go back to the rear of the head here, and I want to just run it round in a line to get me that nice clean back edge. So I'm just running a blob of it and using the rotary function of my vise just so that we end up with that back edge. Now I'm just going to paint the front of the popper head with some of this as well. And then I'll take whatever I have left, and this is why I'm using a skewer as opposed to the little toothpick, in that the length of it I can then rotate, and I'm just using it almost like you were spreading butter around the head. Just need it to join up to the front portion of the head here. And once that's done, then you just need to rotate a little bit while it dries. Now you'll see it wants to run. If you just left it like that, it would actually end up starting to drop off this. So it's just takes a little bit of fiddling with until you get it nice and smooth. So once that heads towards settling, what I'll do is to stick the eyes in. But while it's still fluid, as I said, you can just reposition it. Okay, so my epoxy is just, you can start to see that the flow in it is just slowing down. So at this point I'm going to take these eyes and I'm just going to settle them into those recesses that I had made. Push them in. And that'll hold those in place. But if you want a bit more security, what you can do is mix up a small bit of clear epoxy and just cover the eye so that it joins into the rest of the socket that you'd made for it. And if there are any patches that don't have cover at this stage, then you can just use a slight little coat of the clear, and then you can add in whatever colour of glitter you want just to fill in your gaps, or you can use it to create patterns or whatever you want. But that is essentially our fly tied. It just takes that. It'll take another 5 minutes or so for the clear bit over the eyes to set, but if you want you can put that into a fly dryer. We'll take off our clip, and that is our Sailfish popper tube, a big pink popper tube, done. So as I said, something unusual for me, but if you like what you see, give us a like, subscribe, tell your friends, and until next time, tight lines, and thanks for watching.